Hello everyone. Can you all hear me hopefully? Okay. So my name is Gustav Andreasen. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Avinode for the EMEA market. Today I will just share some insights from the EMEA market and the state of the EMEA market. Looking back a little bit on the last couple of years, there's been a lot of events that has created some interesting data points. So we will definitely look into the European demand and pricing. We will also look at the historic demand from the Russian Federation and also briefly look at the data connectivity today. So before I start, it's always nice to share where you get your data from. We get huge amount of data from our system each and every day. And just to give you an example, last year we supported approximately 17 million requests and 1.3 million trips last year. So we get a huge amount of data, which also gives us some interesting reporting. So digging into the supply and demand, I'm looking back to 2019 up until today. So the first thing we will look at is the European demand and pricing growth. And I will start by showing you the demand index curve. So this is not the Swiss Alps. These are actually the summer peaks that I guess everybody in this room are quite familiar with. So we tend to see historically that this is always the same year after year. We have huge peaks during summertime. And it tends to repeat and evenly grow year after year as well. And as you may all know, also the European demand is mostly driven by leisure. So around 70% usually is driven by leisure flights. The rest is business. But I would say the last couple of years has been a bit different, where business flights have gone down, but leisure trips have gone up. So it's probably around 80% at least on the leisure side now. So following that curve, what usually happens when demand is high, pricing tends to follow. So this curve will show you the pricing. And as you can see, no surprise, it follows the demand. So when prices go up over summer, when demand goes up over summer, pricing tends to follow. The most interesting part here would be the last part of the curve. So if you look to the far right, we can see that demand has come down, as it usually does, but pricing is staying very high. Now, this is driven a lot from the fuel prices staying so high. Oil and fuel prices staying high, so we got to keep the pricing high. And it will be very, very interesting to look at this summer if we can see the peak grow even more than we did last year. Speaking to all of you, it seems like there's a pretty good chance of that happening, even though obviously there was a big hit from the Russia situation that we will look into a little bit more later on. This is a very colorful and nice slide, and I will explain what we're looking at. So to the far right, you can see the different categories. So the different categories of aircraft and the demand from each. So what does this slide tell us? Not much. So what I wanted to show you here is that demand is high everywhere. So it hasn't shown a specific increase on any specific segment. Little bit on the lighter side of the aircraft. So you can see around March 20, we saw a little bit of an increase on the lighter segments. Obviously the big aircraft flew less. There was less transatlantic flights. And the shorter flights has become more and more popular. Now, this is a trend that we will keep seeing and are seeing in Europe, especially now with the Russia situation as well. Flights that would be at least 3 hours going from Moscow are now, the demand is still high, but the flight time is less. So more flights, but less flight time. Looking at some route data and some demand, I just wanted to share this slide just to briefly look at a few things that I think is interesting. Number one, 2019, Dubai-Moscow was on 50th place. It gone up to number one. And if you look at then the Dubai-Maldives, usually around 60, 59 here, gone up to 4. I think we can all agree there's a common denominator here, that we've seen a lot of traffic between Moscow and Dubai recently. And then obviously Maldives being historically a very popular travel destination from Moscow, now the traffic has moved to Dubai and then to the Maldives. So, like I said before, there's been a lot of changes that has impacted the industry. We've gone through COVID. Hopefully we're out of it for the most part. But now after that, the roster situation happened. So there's no real breaks for us. But it has been very interesting. And I was very surprised when I looked at this slide, because I myself have worked closely with the Russian market, and we always have had a thinking that it's just been increasing. The amounts of requests, the amounts of demand coming out of specifically Moscow has just increased and increased over the years. Looking back at this, we can see that the heyday actually was around 2012, 2011, 2013, and then you can see a big drop 2015. So I was quite surprised by this actually. But then on the right side there, you can see that there was a huge uptick around 2020 there at the end, and this was mainly due to the lighter restrictions that Moscow and Russia had with COVID. So there was a lot of flights going to especially the Middle East from Russia, because there was easier to get there, and you didn't need much of a vaccine pass at all. So I think that was the spike. If this would have kept going a little bit further, we would see a huge drop, obviously. Now we don't see much at all going out of Moscow, obviously. Now, this slide is a little bit left field, but I wanted to share this because I think it's interesting. I mean, us being a technology company, obviously, we look at this a lot. And we can see the amount of webhook calls to third-party application. Basically, what this means is that the amount of softwares that want to talk to each other is increasing. This used to be quite expensive to do. It was only the big companies that really could afford to spend money on technology to integrate with other softwares. We have seen that that price has gone down significantly, but we are in a fragmented business still. But now, and especially if I ask all of us here at Avinode, we have a lot of conversations with API connections, connecting to FMS systems, CRM systems. People want to work within their softwares but still have access to the data that other softwares are supplying. So this is just going to continue to increase every year. But it's interesting because our business tends to be the last to jump on that technology train. But we see that happening more and more. So, what can we conclude for the future when we move forward? Are we going to have a sad face, a smiley face, or just a face? We have seen a step change in leisure demand and activity driven by the pandemic. It's been a huge one. We did not predict this. When this happened, we thought it would be a very, very slow recovery. We were completely wrong, and we saw a huge dip, but then a huge uptake. And it actually went above, and it's continued to grow. So it will be very interesting to follow this, to see if the new clients that has come in, while commercial aviation has been down, if they're going to stay once commercial airlines are back. That will be very interesting to follow. Supply is fixed, and price has shifted upwards to reflect this, obviously. So we have seen a steady rise in prices. So that is also interesting to follow, if the new segment will continue to pay this quite high price, or if they will go back to the way things were before. If I once flew a private jet, I would probably not want to go back, but then again, that's not really what I'm doing. Last part. And the invasion of Ukraine obviously was a shock, but I think especially talking to people here, it seems like the market has recovered very, very well. Demand is still super high. I think every operator knows this, every broker as well. It's hard to find flights, it's hard to buy aircraft, so there's a huge demand but a very fixed supply. So it's a volatile market, but there's a lot of potential for it to actually grow, and that we have seen a permanent step up in demand. So hard to say, but I think that we will see that stay for quite some time actually. So thank you all for listening. That was all for me. Thank you so much.